Let me tell you a story. 2 years ago, I had this idea, or maybe 3 years ago, I had an idea that, we should focus on homeownership. The Center for Indian Country Development was launched in 2015, and we did not have an agenda. We did not have a roadmap. I was told, to go out and make something of it, to figure out what Indian country needs. And we were guided by Leadership Council, National Leadership Council, many of whom are in the room today. Miriam Jorgensen, Elsie Meeks, we have Jackie Pata. We're now joined by Crystal Langholz. I'm wondering who else might be here, but we have Nancy Appleby now on our Leadership Council. But these are the thought leaders from Indian country, and as we put together our ideas, I came up with 4 areas. The first was land, because everything in Indian country, as we know in our hearts, we've heard, from the data, everything concerns lands. It touches and concerns our homelands, our history, our legacy. So we absolutely had to focus on land. Our legacy work at the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis has been business and entrepreneurship, so we absolutely had to continue the work of creating a private economy and spurring development, business development in Indian country. The other 2 areas are areas that are, I think, probably the most important pillars of economic development, community development in Indian country, and one is home ownership, and the other is education. And as we've heard today, many of these concepts, these issues are interrelated. But homeownership was absolutely critical to me. I saw that when I was the Deputy Solicitor for Indian Affairs at the Department of the Interior, where I saw the work of the Bureau of Indian Affairs in processing all the work that goes into making land usable and developable. So I knew that we needed to tackle it from a process perspective. I also knew from my days at USDA Rural Development that homeownership can transform a community. The safety and security of having a home that creates well-being and financial wealth for individuals, we want that. We need that in Indian country too. So I absolutely thought we needed to take on homeownership. And as I started learning more about what it takes to develop housing on the reservation, I thought, oh my gosh, I need better heads, I need more heads, I need the experts in the room. My family has an allotment on the South Dakota side of the Standing Rock Reservation, and it's now been divided into many property interest owners, but my mother kept her tract very intact. And as we thought about how to really create a place for the family on the reservation, we wanted to build a house there, a place for us to gather. And as we heard this morning, the infrastructure costs are pretty high to build in a remote area. But even more daunting for me was the leasehold process of how to, one, maybe partition the land that we have, get a leasehold on that land, and then think about development. So it's still a goal of our family. It's now in the hands of my niece. My mother gift deeded her allotment to my niece so that it's all intact and will not be divided further. But it's a challenge that I think resonates with all of us, is we have a homeland. It's where our heart is. It's where our family is. And we want that to be a place for us to go to. So it's very, very personal to me. So we started the work 2 years ago, formally started the work 2 years ago at a convening in Salt River at the Maricopa Pima Indian community. And we had this really sexy title, Mortgage Lending in Indian Country. But you know what? A lot of you joined us and were attracted to that topic. And we spent the first day really trying to break down and understand what are these issues, what are these challenges, what are the data telling us? And the next day I remember having big ideas of how we're going to get into groups and talk about this and talk about that, when Elsie Meeks stepped forward and she said, I think we need somebody to get their arms around this. We need one person or one entity, one organization to get the arms around this. We have the New Mexico Native Home Ownership Coalition. We have the South Dakota Native Home Ownership Coalition. And so Elsie's idea, passed on to us, was a national Native Home Ownership Coalition. And that's where the coalition was born 2 years ago in Salt River. And we have 5 working groups. We have the Lending Systems Working Group, headed by Steve Barbier. We have the Capital and Secondary Markets Working Group, headed by Joanna Donahoe. We have the Data and Research Working Group, headed by yours truly, Dick Todd. And we have the Home Buyer Readiness, Diana Holshoe and Crystal Langholz and Jeff Galbraith. We also had Tribal Leaders Working Group. And this was headed up by Jason Adams, who is just a tremendous champion for housing and home ownership in Indian country. And we had some big ideas, but we really didn't have a roadmap for what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. But we knew that we needed to have a plan, we needed to have goals, we needed to have objectives, and we needed to have something really tangible to work from. And what became of that work 2 years ago is what we're celebrating today, which is our Tribal Leaders Handbook on Home Ownership, the inspiration from the coalition, from Jason Adams and his working group. But as we've tried to imagine what Indian country could look like through the lens of home ownership, we've engaged hundreds of our partners across the country who've made really fantastic, tremendous contributions. So right now, we want to celebrate you and we want to recognize you for stepping up to this challenge, making your contributions, and we really want to celebrate all the work that you've done. So I would like Nicki and Jesse to come up with me, to the stage with me, and as your name is called, I'd love for you to join me on the stage, stay on the stage for a group photo. We have something to share with you and recognize you by. And we're going to go in alphabetical order. So starting with the B's, Steve Barbier, NeighborWorks America, Lending Systems Working Group Chair and Handbook Contributor. Joanna Donahoe, Seven Sisters Development Group, Capital and Secondary Markets Working Group Chair and Handbook Contributor. Leslie Newman, come on up. Also from Seven Sisters, she worked on this Tribal Leaders Working Group, and she's also a handbook contributor. Dick Todd, CICD, Research and Data Working Group, and handbook contributor. Jason Adams, I guess I didn't start in alphabetical order. Salish and Kootenai Housing Authority, he's with the Tribal Leaders Working Group Chair, and he's also one of our case studies in our handbook. Joe Garcia, National Native Home Ownership Coalition Tribal Leader Ambassador. Sharon Vogel from Cheyenne River, come on up. She's with the Cheyenne River Sioux Housing Authority, the National Native Home Ownership Coalition Leader Ambassador. She's also a handbook contributor and case study, a really big job there. Bob Gochi, he's been on our Capital and Secondary Markets Working Group Chair. Miriam Jorgensen, Native Nations Institute. She's been working with us on research and data in our data working group. Nancy Appleby, for all you do in every single working group, and you've been a lending systems extraordinaire. Come on up. Craig Nolte is here from the San Francisco Fed. He's participated in our Tribal Leaders Working Group. Kevin Blazer, who we heard from yesterday, he's Saginaw CHIP Economic Development, and he was co-chair of our Lending Systems Working Group for quite a while. Lynn Trujillo from USDA, where are you? Come on up. She is a contributor to the research and the lending systems. She also headed up the Leasing and Title Subcommittee. I want us to give a big, big round of applause to all of these contributors and And one more. There's one more person I really want to recognize, and it's Laurie Corty. And I get very emotional when I talk about the handbook because it's been a labor of love. It's like giving birth in a lot of ways. But Laurie has been part of our work throughout this process. She worked very closely in terms of the design, the layout, every bit of color, every bit of style and technique. She has brought a vision of color and creativeness and spirit into this book. So I really want to recognize Laurie Corty especially. Very good. I would be remiss in not bringing up Russ Caney. Russ Caney from Enterprise was a big part of the inspiration for this work. So we want Ted, and what about Ted Bulow? Where do we have Ted in the room? Come on up, Ted. Ted and I go back to USDA rural development days and trying to figure out how to get homeownership in Indian country to really penetrate those boundaries and those and remove those barriers. So thank you. So here we are. Nicki Paratus, I want everyone to know she's been spearheading the coalition. She's been the coordinator of all the meetings and the subgroups, and she did a tremendous amount of work for this convening as well. And without Nicki, we probably would not have had a cohesive and energized coalition. So I'd like to recognize Nicki Paratus. And where do we have Fred? Fred Fisher? All right, come on up, Fred. Fred is a bonus for us. Fred is not a Minneapolis Fed employee, but he is an employee of the Casey Family Programs. And Fred worked with me when I was at USDA as a Casey Fellow, and he moved to Minnesota to work with us here. And he brings an incredible amount of energy and commitment and passion to this work. And he's a great connector, great communicator, great connector, and he's been a big part of the coalition cohesiveness as well. I want to bring Jessie up to the stage. Jessie recently joined the CICD. Was it December, Jessie? Come on up. And she just dived in. You know, she just said, I don't know what you're all about, but whatever it is, I'm in for it. And she's done just about everything that we've asked her and more. So I could not be more proud of our people. I could not be more proud of the work that we're doing. And the coalition, I believe, is really, truly making a difference around the country, in your communities, and with our people. So thank you so much, everybody. All right, we've got more work to do and a big announcement, so you can get. Oh, yes, do we have a photo opportunity? Okay. Okay, I guess we need to move down this way and get close together.
Some volunteers for the front.
Sharon, I think we need to.
Oh, we need to move over.
Jesse, I think right there you go.
Shorter.
Thank you. All right. Wonderful, wonderful. Whew. All right. When Jason said we need a book, we need a guidebook, we need to know how to do this work, from home buyer readiness to large-scale development, to planning and designing houses. And what is this lending system all about, and what are all these programs? We needed a model. We really needed a good template for understanding what this looks like, what this really looks like, what it could be. And thankfully, we had a good model in the Enterprise Community Partners Guidebook for New Mexico tribes. And Russ was very generous in sharing that with us. And we took a look at it and we said, if it works for New Mexico, we can take it bigger and broader and make it work across the country. So at this time, I would love to invite Terry Ludwig up to the stage from Enterprise Community Partners, not only a co-sponsor of our event, but they're also co-copyright owners of the handbook. Terry leads Enterprise's national efforts to create affordable homes, strengthen communities across the country, particularly through its Rural and Native American Initiative. We hope to keep the momentum going with Enterprise after this conference with a community-based technical assistance program, and we'll be talking about that more this afternoon. So Terry, would love to you to share some thoughts with us.
Patrice, I just want to say thank you so much to Patrice Ganesh. And I don't know how much applause you've gotten, but it couldn't be enough. So, yeah. I was inspired just listening to the words and to see everyone coming up on stage and this incredible network of people that are assembled to talk about the power of home and home ownership and all that means to the people we serve. And it's such a privilege to be here. So thanks to Patrice, your staff, to the Center for Indian Country Development, and to the entire Federal Reserve of Minneapolis. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak and to share our work today. And I'm really proud of the tremendous partnership that we've developed to advance the opportunities for homeownership on tribal lands across the country and create the opportunity, as we were talking about earlier this morning, for choice, for real choice. And this is what this is about. And we're truly lucky to have this incredible network of partners and people that are dedicated to this cause. So thanks to everyone who's here. We're truly grateful. I have the privilege of leading Enterprise Community Partners, and as such, we are very much focused on the issue of housing and building strong communities. And we recognize the fundamental role that homeownership can play in helping families build economic stability and also creating strong communities. We've been advancing housing solutions for tribal members since the 1990s. And we began by investing in multifamily housing using the low-income housing tax credit program. That's really when we started. And our commitment deepened when we established a program in Albuquerque. I think we just mentioned that, to address housing and economic challenges that we saw on the ground, specifically for New Mexico's pueblos and Native communities. We then expanded this to a national platform so that we could bring all of our resources to bear. We often think about the resources we bring in kind of a three-legged stool, so making sure that we're bringing the financial capital into a community. We're also thinking about solutions, both local and national, that we can bring, but really recognizing the importance of that local engagement. And then also what we're learning today, as we were talking about early this morning, also policy is so important. So how do we take what's working and what's not working and feed that into policy so we can have much more systemic and broader scale change? So that's what we've been doing in assisting Native communities. And just in terms of what we're doing today, I just want to highlight probably three main areas of our work that we're doing. So one is we work to build the capacity of tribal organizations that are directly involved in housing and economic development. An example of this, some of you here receive HUD-funded Section 4. This program has helped dozens of tribal organizations meet pressing organizational needs so that they can provide quality, affordable homes to their members. Second, we bring resources and technical expertise to tribal communities. Some of you are familiar with Enterprise Green Communities that works to increase the environmental efficiency of homes and make them more healthy and also just more cost effective. We think that's very, very important part of what we can offer on the ground. Another area also is that some of you are familiar with the Rose Architectural Fellowship Program, where we bring really best-in-class designers, architects into communities to work with community-based organizations for 2 to 3 years at a time. And it's been great because our Rose Fellows have learned so much from the tribal organizations that they've worked with. We've worked with 4 tribal organizations, including Okayawinge, Santo Domingo, Red Feather, and right now we have a Rose Fellow who's doing great work at Thunder Valley on the Pine Ridge Reservation. So, yay, I know. Patrice is cueing a clap. And I think that clap has to do with both the folks who are helping us sponsor that, and it also has to do with the real work that's getting done on the ground and the influence it has in terms of practice and then how we scale that practice. So that's incredible. And then the last piece, in terms of driving capital, the financial capital we've been talking about all morning is super important. So we have a CDFI, which is, for those of you who don't know, that's a community development financial institution. Most of you do know that. Our CDFI is called Enterprise Community Loan Fund, and we've worked with Native CDFIs over the past 2 decades to help them advance their work in housing production, home ownership, counseling, and credit repair. We've invested about $100 million in affordable rental housing for tribal members across the country, and we also helped make sure that helped develop the first permanent supportive housing development ever created on a reservation. That was Dreamcatcher Homes on the White Earth Reservation. So we're super proud of this work, and I'm also humbled by how much work there is to do. So even with all that we have done, we all only work in partnership with everything everyone in the room has done and well beyond. We recognize that many tribal members face extraordinary challenges on the path to homeownership. We know that tribal authorities want and can benefit from other resources and support. And this awareness, as Patrice mentioned, just helped us to think about how could we best help. And in 2016, we were inspired to create this manual for designing and operating homeownership programs on tribal lands, focused specifically in New Mexico on pueblos and tribal communities. This earlier manual also prompted our partnership with the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis and the Center for Indian Country Development. And together, we've expanded this manual, as you just heard, to serve Indian country nationally. So we are super excited to unveil this today. The new Tribal Leaders Handbook on Home Ownership is a powerful resource for tribal leaders and other stakeholders like lenders, government agencies, community builders, to help them unlock the potential for home ownership on trust land and navigate the financial and development processes, which we know can be quite complex, to meet the needs of Native communities. So for Enterprise, this handbook is part of a broader strategy to enable Native home ownership. And we're also excited to talk this afternoon and to unveil also that we're going to launch a technical assistance and training initiative to complement this manual. And I really thank Russ Caney, who leads our work on rural and Native American, our full program on that across the country. He's been amazing at helping us to conceptualize this and think about how do you marry up not only the manual, but what is the capacity building that needs to go along with that. And this TA initiative, a huge special shout out to our supporters. So thank you, Wells Fargo. Thank you. Thank you, Freddie Mac. Thank you. Who are 2 of our sponsors for this TA initiative. And we hope to engage additional funders. Did you hear me say that? Additional funders, good, who share our commitment to this work, because we know that this can be very high impact. So in closing, I just want to say that Enterprise is going to look for other opportunities to assist in any way we can. We're here to partner with you and do what it takes to advance tribal communities. And, I'm humbled by the work that's been done here, and thank you for your partnership, and thank you, and super excited about the launch of this work. Let's do it. All right.
I just wanted to share, I was asked to share just a little bit about, kind of the involvement of the tribal working group and some of the, how we got to where we are now today with this unveil and this opportunity that we have with this new resource. And so what I wanted to talk just briefly about here a little bit is when we got together, and I think there was a show of hands earlier, how many folks were able to make it out to Scottsdale for the convening that happened a couple years ago. One of the things that happened there as we've wrapped up the second day was to ask people to participate in work groups. And one of the work groups was a tribal leaders work group. And as these ideas were presented, it was described that, there was going to be this necessity to reach out to tribal leaders. And I think this actually came from a planning process we went through that day, actually. And so that was the importance of really getting to tribal leaders, because even at that meeting, I think we reached out and there wasn't a lot of tribal leaders in the room again. And so the importance in the home ownership effort of getting to a message to tribal leaders to be in the room, to be present, and to be involved. And so we started a work group just based on that effort to reach out to tribal leaders. And if I recall, it was the smallest group in the room. So there was just a handful of us at the table. But we made a plan. We left there with an idea to go to start having conference calls and getting together following that. I'd like to, as Patrice said, was part of the my idea. It certainly wasn't my idea. It was a collective idea from the work group. As we started meeting, we started talking about, how do we package this message? How do we reach out to tribal leaders? How do we do this? And in those conversations, it became very apparent that we couldn't just go and have these conversations for tribal leaders, that there would have to be some type of strategy that would be a follow-up in some manner, and just be prepared for however tribes are going to react to this message. The important piece of that was what you see here today, this handbook, that we can, in some form or fashion, leave behind, get it to tribes, get it in their hands, so that they would have a resource to go to that would be available to them, as Patrice just said, soup to nuts. And as our work group progressed, we had taken a shot at the table of contents, trying to put some sidebars around what should be in this product. And so as we progressed, and then the idea was pitched to Patrice, and then she just ran with it, and she just took it on and ran. Early on we had the discussions about we probably shouldn't recreate the wheel, that there's probably something out there we could model after, and Patrice and her folks were able to do that, go find something. And so that's kind of where, our tribal leader work group kind of led that effort. In the last year that we've been working on this, and in the last year, I had the fortunate ability to work with Joe Garcia, and we went out and met with some tribal leaders that were meeting at a meeting last September in Santa Fe. And we kind of did the pitch to the tribal leaders that were in the room. And I tell you, it was very effective to have my friend Joe there. Joe and I go back a ways, back when I was a little guy. No. Jackie was the director of National American Indian Housing Council, and Joe served a term on the National American Indian Housing Council, and I served with him for a short time. So we go back to those days. But Joe was able to connect with the tribal leaders in the room because he's a tribal leader. And we really drew the tribal leaders in at that convening, at that meeting in Santa Fe. And that really showed that, he was able to lay out how housing affects all, home ownership, having your own home affects all of these other things. And so I want to thank Joe, because he showed in that presentation that day, he talked about his own Okewinge and their Pueblo. And I learned a lot because, us in the northern plains, we traditionally were nomadic people. We moved with the seasons, we moved with the animals. Joe was able to share his perspective from his traditional perspective of the Pueblo, That's a permanent structure, and a lot of those structures have been there for time immemorial, you know. And so home ownership to them was a home that sat there and was there for generation to generation. And so I thought that was a very important message in how he was able to connect with his fellow Pueblo, primarily Pueblo members in the Southwest there that were at that meeting. There's some history there. I won't go into the great detail that Joe was able to share about how, you know, the HUD program kind of caused the tribe to diverge from that idea with the 37 Act funding that we all received for several decades, because they really weren't into building traditional housing. It was, everybody gets this stick-built, looks like this, and it's going to sit over here, and there's going to be 50 of them that all look the same. And so under Nahasda, they were able to get back to that traditional way of housing and rebuild and fix up some of those structures. So I thought that was a very powerful message. I just wanted to share a little bit of that with you. I wanted to share just a little bit about the hope of how this product will be used. I think it's very important that we had a meeting last night kind of talking some strategy. There's going to be some follow-up presentations. There's going to be some trainings, some TA even, how we can do that. So stay tuned for that as we move forward. You know, there might be tribes that just want a book, they take it home, they engage, and they make it happen, and we never hear from them again, and they go on and do great things. And there might be, the other end of the scale might be some tribes that need a little more hand-holding, a little more encouragement, a little more preparation for each step that needs to be taken, or analysis of where they're at today and how we overcome some of those hurdles, you know, that maybe it's a tribal court situation that needs to be overcome. So there's a lot of work there that needs to be done. And so, you know, my hope is that we can just flood Indian country with this product and say, here's something that can help your people. Along with all the other issues we talked about yesterday and this morning, there's a lot of work left to be done. I just want to share a little bit about, you know, perspective in building off of what Joe shared, you know, my story there with Joe and the traditional housing for, I was able to go down and visit with my friend Floyd Tortolita down in Acoma not too long ago. And my second trip there over the years. They have some of the oldest Pueblo housing and traditional housing, you know, in the continental United States. And it was interesting to hear how, again, in those communities, how the family, you know, passes down the home to the I believe it's the youngest daughter. Gets the home, takes care of the parents, and it's her job to take care of the home and pass it on then to her family. And this has been happening. I think the one structure there they have in the Sky City at Acoma is was dated back to the 1300s, 1100s maybe. And so, you know, that way of living, that home ownership opportunity, as I like to say, was passed down and started centuries ago. And so, you know, Floyd was able to share that with us. That this is, and he just recently built a new tax credit project that was very much modeled after that traditional housing. Beautiful, beautiful place. Then I take a look, you know, back to even my own family and some of the things I've learned over the years with our Salish people. You know, again, being nomadic, we moved with the seasons, we moved with the animals, but primarily we had a homeland, a place we always came back to and called home. And I remember as a little kid traveling, you know, to the Bitterroot Valley south of Missoula, and my dad would always make sure to point out to us when we'd go through this one area just outside of Stevensville, Montana. There's where your great-grandfather had his land. And as I've read and heard stories about my great-grandfather, he was a wealthy man, had a lot of horses, and that was his role in the tribe was providing horses whenever they needed horses. And so he owned and kept care of a lot of horses. But on this piece of property that he had, where he called home, we call home, still, there was a cellar there that had been dug in on the side of this hill. And I always remember that because that that showed me that that was his home. They made a mark in the land there, and they had a place there that they called home. And so from that, you know, I think that just kind of builds on everything you've heard as far as the success of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes and some of the things that we enjoy that have made my job easier today is just how the tradition of having a home, having a place to call home is really ingrained, I guess. And the last thing I wanted to do, I mean, you know, even from that, growing up, seeing my dad, seeing, you know, how he took care of my great-grandma, provided a home for her, provided his own home for his family, and, you know, just following those steps and those ways of providing. I, again, think that's why there's a lot of families on our reservation that have done that. The last thing I want to do, well, I have an announcement to make on another issue, but the last thing I wanted to do, and you know, I don't know, again, I know my friend Joe's here, tribal leader in the room. I don't know if we have very many other tribal leaders in the room. But I really, really believe, and I think we've made the point very evident here in the last day, that tribal leaders have to take this issue and run with it. And they have to lead by example. They have to find a way to make this happen for their people. And, you know, if this is being recorded, I'm pleading to the tribal leaders that might be watching this in the future to do this. I challenge you. I challenge you. For all the folks in the room that are going to take this back to your tribes, I challenge you to take this to your tribal leaders and say, wherever we are in this process, we've got to take this and do the best that we can with it. And expand our efforts to the best that we can with the resources we have. So I just want to encourage you to do that. I want to encourage all of the tribes in the room here that there's been a lot of work and a lot of effort put behind this. Good work, passionate work that a lot of folks have put into this. And so hopefully we can take this home, take it back to wherever we call home, share with our friends, our families, but get this before tribal leaders that will make this happen. I just don't want to see this work come to nothing. I've been in housing for a lot of years, and sometimes I get a little frustrated when I go to meetings and we continue to talk about things and the same things come up. And we've done that. We've done that here in the last day and a half. But here's a product. Here's something you can take home. Here's something that's done. It's able to be brought home in a product that can be set before families and say, we now have a way to help. We have an answer to questions, and not only just the product, but there's a room full of people here that are resources for people to reach out to and work with to make this home ownership effort. I just think it's a huge void in Indian country, and we got to make sure we can do all we can to fill that void. So with that, that's my encouragement. I didn't bring my pom-poms, but that was my best effort. The last thing I wanted to announce, and again, it's kind of off subject. I apologize for this, but I'm getting ready to head out here in a little bit. But there is an announcement for an effort that's going on. In 2012, there was the first World Indigenous Housing Conference that happened in Vancouver, British Columbia. And there was planning that started, I think, 2010 for that. Well, the Australian people that left there, I think there was 145 nations represented. Indigenous peoples from 145 nations attended the conference. Now we are now planning the next one. The Australians left there saying they would do the next one. They would do it in 3 or 4 years. Well, maybe that's time in Australia. I don't know. But we are now planning, and I just want to let you all know to be looking for information on it. I know Tony's involved with the planning committee, myself, and that we've got a U.S. delegation that's working on this. But the second World Indigenous Housing Conference will happen in May 20th through the 24th of 2019 in Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia. So be looking for that if you're interested in those type of things. when I attended that last one in Canada, it was very interesting to have a discussion about housing from Indigenous peoples across the world. And so if that interests you, I'll be looking for information on that. So with that, I don't want to take up much more of your time, but thank you for indulging me.